Hi, my name's Drew Augustine, and I'm the author of The 20 Murders. Today, I'm going to read you an extract from the book which best captures the essence of what the story is about. I've tweaked it a little so there are no spoilers. The extract features my main protagonist, Detective Constable Morven MacLeod, who finds herself smack bang in the middle of a major murder investigation. Morven's about to go undercover to attend a speaking event hosted by a group called Real Women Scotland. Her partner, Dave Newton, is parked close by, listening and watching via a brooch that Morven wears, and we join Morven as she approaches the venue. She heard the commotion before she saw it. A large group of trans rights activists had gathered outside the theatre and were yelling abuse and waving placards. She wondered what it was about women wanting to exercise their right to free speech that triggered such hostility. The noise became deafening as she drew closer. A line of police observed the protesters, with officers pushing back any foam-flecked nutters who ventured too close. Morven kept her head down and made her way to the end of the queue, hoping not to be recognised. A man in a shock frock who resembled a bricklayer grabbed his crotch and screamed at her, "Sucking my girl dick." The police pushed him back, but he continued to yell as other women filed in behind her. Morven shuffled forwards in the line, anxious the militants might at any moment overwhelm the officers and break through. She'd policed numerous protests and marches in her time, but rarely had she witnessed such vitriol. Hatred and fury rolled off these activists like a boiling wave. The women around her appeared terrified and some cowered in fear. Stood in front of her were a mother and teenage daughter, escorted by a man, an ordinary-looking bloke in his 50s. Watching the activists swoop warily, he kept asking if the women were sure about attending. A scuffle broke out nearby when an enormous trans woman in a wig and pink dress launched himself at a group of middle-aged women, shouting, "Death to all TERFs." He was quickly and forcibly removed, and Morven wondered what the local custody sergeant would make of him. It was a relief when she finally reached the entrance to the theatre. Morven overheard the man in front promise to collect his family later, and when he turned to leave, she saw fear in his eyes. Inside, security was tight with numerous burly doormen clad in black. Morven handed her ticket to a security guard, who checked her over, glanced inside her handbag, and directed her into the main hall. Although it was busy, the auditorium felt serene compared to the melee outside. Morven slipped into a seat at the back and removed her outer coat, ensuring her brooch was pointing forwards. The crowd comprised mainly of middle-aged females, but among them were girls in their teens and women old enough to be grandmothers. A few men, many wearing pride colours without the black trans symbol, peppered the hall. Morven gasped when she spotted Natalie sitting near the front. She wasn't surprised to see her friend at this event, only that she hadn't mentioned going. Once everyone was seated, the security personnel closed the doors and stood along the edges of the hall with their hands behind their backs. Morven could still hear the protesters outside shouting. A young woman with long dark hair bounded onto the stage and introduced herself as one of the organisers. She thanked everyone for braving the activists outside and announced the main speaker. The hall erupted in cheers and applause as Imogen James walked up to the podium. She was smaller than Morven had imagined, with platinum hair and a dazzling lipstick smile, but she had a presence that belied her stature. It was several minutes before she could be heard above the cheering. Speaking in a soft English accent, she said, "You're probably wondering what all the gentlemen outside have their knickers in a twist about." This was met with howls of laughter, which soon died down when the screen behind her flickered into life. The footage showed an angry bunch of trans rights activists mobbing her at a speaking event abroad. Morven had read how the police had failed in their duty to protect her, and, had it not been for her security detail, she might have been badly injured or killed. When people ask me what I do, I say I'm a campaigner for women's rights. Despite what the media report and what's on my Wikipedia page, I'm not a Nazi, a transphobe, or a bigot. My sole aim is to defend women's spaces, our language and our sports. Clapping ensued, and she paused to let it subside. What we mustn't forget is that these were hard-fought rights, and they must be defended from the type of men who would do us harm. A picture of Adam Graham appeared, the convicted double rapist who went by the name Isla Bryson. Graham had made headline news when, after declaring himself transgender, he demanded to serve his time in a women's prison and have his crime recorded as that of a female. His picture was met with shouts of anger from the audience. Imogen leaned closer to the microphone. Female-only spaces exist for a reason, and we must never cede them, and certainly not because a group of deluded narcissistic men demand it. The noise from the rabble outside punctuated her words. She went on to describe how language was under attack from the trans lobby. She said, "I'm not a bleeder with a bonus hole, nor am I a womb haver or an egg carrier. I'm a woman, an adult human female. And the irony is that this so-called inclusive language reduces women to nothing more than our biology, and from the very people who deny that biology is real. It's catsuit crazy." This was met with whoops and applause. Imogen then explained why she refused to use preferred pronouns or have people tell her what to say, which she termed compelled speech. A list of pronouns appeared on screen, including Z and Zer, and an even longer list of genders. To the audience's amusement, Imogen highlighted a few of these, including alien gender and clown gender. She read out the definition of astrogender as a fluid gender identity that transitions from male to female to non-binary, depending on the current configuration of the night sky. Morven could barely believe what she was hearing. "They will not control our tongues," said Imogen. "If you're asked your pronouns or your gender identity, politely decline to answer." That received ear-splitting applause. When the theatre quietened, she talked about the gender-goofy newspapers that accepted large donations to peddle trans propaganda. She displayed an article from a broadsheet about a woman who'd murdered her boyfriend and brother, before explaining that these violent crimes had actually been committed by a trans woman, a male. Language, she said, is being twisted to the point that it's nonsensical, and we can no longer trust journalists to accurately report the sex of violent men. There then followed a discussion about trans athletes competing in women's sports, and a picture of the 6'4" trans swimmer Leah Thomas filled the screen. It showed him towering over the females he triumphed over in a women's university competition. Imogen said, not only were these women forced to race against this man, but they to suffer the indignity of changing in the same locker room as him, a fully intact male. When the women complained, they were told that they needed to be re-educated. A rumble of fury rippled through the audience. Indicating the screen behind her, she said, the university was gaslighting these women. Their feelings clearly didn't matter, and they were told to put up and shut up. Footage then showed a rugby game in which an Australian female player was poleaxed by a trans-identified male. The lady beside Morven remarked it was a miracle the woman had walked from the pitch unharmed. She said rugby finally stood up to this madness by refusing to let males play against females because they realised that were they to do so, women would be badly injured or killed. Biological sex is real, said Imogen. Humans, like all other mammals, come in two reproductive varieties, male or female. Almost every cell in our bodies is sex-stamped. Morven cast her eye over the audience, hoping that Dave could see and hear what she saw. Imogen continued, her voice growing in volume. Sex is not a feeling or a spectrum. It's an immutable biological fact. A photograph of a protest outside of the Scottish Parliament appeared, which showed a woman holding a banner declaring, "Women are born, not worn." We cannot change our sex. Men cannot be women, and women cannot be men. She gave a dark chuckle. Yet simply stating that fact in Scotland is enough to have me charged with hate speech. The hisses of anger from the crowd were drowned out by the racket outside as activists banged on the doors and windows. The security guards glanced nervously at one another, and one spoke into a walkie-talkie. Morven hoped Dave was aware of what was happening. Despite the disturbance, Imogen went on. But the real issue is how this insidious ideology affects our children. Thousands of kids have been sold the idea that they're born in the wrong body, and this has led to them undergoing experimental treatment with hormones that will likely shorten their lives and render them sterile. A photograph of a young woman suffering from early onset osteoporosis appeared. Her spine was so weakened that she developed a dowager's hump. "We know these drugs do harm," said Imogen. "They don't just pause puberty, they cause irreversible damage to children's physical and mental development. We're talking weak bones, cancer, heart disease, and changes in brain development." She said in a low voice, "And that's before they've had the surgeries." A collage of photographs featuring girls with double mastectomy scars appeared, and a deathly silence fell. Morven felt nauseous looking at the mutilation inflicted on these young women. Imogen ploughed on. "Same-sex attracted, autistic and troubled girls are being fooled into believing that if they cut off their breasts, they'll be happy." A shocking picture appeared of a boy whose genitals had been removed, and it caused howls of anger and disgust. Imogen said, I apologise if you find these pictures upsetting, but what I find more disturbing is that the head of the Clownfish charity took her son to Thailand on his 16th birthday to be castrated. And this is the same charity the Scottish Government fund to spread this ideology in schools. The crowd's wrath was almost palpable, matching the fury levelled at them from outside. Imogen's voice rose to the challenge. "Our children are being medicated, sterilised and mutilated in the name of gender ideology." Her words were cut short by a cacophony of aggressive pounding on the windows and doors. The sound reverberated through the room, creating a ripple of unease. Attendees exchanged worried glances as the reality of the threat sank in. The thuds intensified and the security team flocked to block the doors. The atmosphere inside the theatre turned to fear. The main entrance doors became the target of the protesters' kicks and blows, and the noise of splintering wood pierced the air. Several people from the audience rushed to help the doorman form a barricade. Morven jumped in fright as a brick shattered a window and landed nearby. Panic ensued as other missiles followed, and the audience were showered with glass. Morven dived for cover beneath the seating and dialed Dave's number on her phone, realising she'd missed several calls from him. He answered in the first ring. "Get the troops in here now," she yelled. "They're about to break through." Dave sounded as frantic as she felt. "On their way. Just get yourself to safety." Morven watched in horror as one of the rear fire exits gave way and an angry mob of activists stormed into the hall. Chaos followed as they set about the women, punching, kicking and pushing them. Morven darted towards the main entrance, almost losing her footing in the stampede. Her phone was knocked from her hand and trampled underfoot. Some of the security guards began funneling the women towards a side exit. As Morven joined the throng trying to escape, she saw one lady hit in the face, pushed to the ground and stamped upon. Without thinking, Morven ran full pelt at her assailant and sent him flying into the chairs. The man, dressed in a red tutu and bra, scrambled to his feet, roaring in fury. Morven tried to tug the dazed woman to her feet, but Tutu Man sprang at her. Morven sidestepped and kicked him hard in the groin, and with a grunt he folded like a deck chair. She dragged the terrified woman to her feet just as police swarmed into the hall. Pulling the woman out of the path, she fled to the side entrance, and they spilled out onto the pavement. Blue lights flashed, and uniformed police and high-vis were everywhere. She had never been so happy to see her colleagues. I hope you've enjoyed listening to this extract from the 20 Murders. If you'd like to find out more about me and my reasons for writing the book, please head on over to drewaugustine.com. Oh, and the book is available on Amazon in paperback or ebook. And if you have Kindle Unlimited, it's free. Thank you for listening. And I'd also like to thank the Women's Rights Network for hosting this podcast and for all their support. Bye for now.
If you enjoyed listening to this podcast, head over to womensrights.network/WRN-podcast to listen, download and subscribe to more great episodes. And if you'd like to join us, go to womensrights.network/join-WRN.